I watch episode 38 of Pokemon every year because I watch every episode of Pokemon every year, and because I don't suffer from photosensitive epilepsy. Episode 38, Dennō Senshi Porygon, doesn't have a proper English title because it was banned worldwide after sending 685 viewers to the hospital, which coincidentally is the setting of this episode. Life imitates art, and this art nearly ended lives. The episode begins with Psyduck having an episode. Misty fights to keep its airways clear as Brock and Ash enjoy their donuts. Pikachu is also living with debilitating illness. They've been traveling for roughly 5 months, and those months have been very roughly. In mouse years, Pikachu is middle-aged, and it's beginning to feel all of those ages. They seek medical care at a nearby Pokemon Center, which, like every other, is overburdened and understaffed, just like the hospitals of Japan after this episode aired. The nurse explains that an error in the newly implemented algorithm meant to ease the burden of healthcare is causing Pokemon to be lost forever, the earliest instance of actual catfishing. Brock suspects that a simple virus is the culprit of the connectivity issues because he doesn't have any actual computer science experience. Neither does his fellow mid-80s millennial, who conceptualizes computer viruses as actual demons, a rare glimpse into Ash's thought processes. Dr. Akihabara, the actual computer scientist, disputes their novitiate know-how, but offering no alternative explanation, he runs away from the problem. Ash and friends follow him to his estate, and for the second episode in a row, they break into a mansion and are introduced to a pink Pokemon that can change its shape. The purported prodigy's prized production, Porygon, the 64-bit Pokemon. Literally projecting his problems, Dr. Akihabara explains how the Snatchers also snuck into his unsecure abode, stole his prototype Porygon, and then went into the internet to steal more Pokemon using his other invention, the Human Transfer System, a teleportation device similar to that used for Pokemon that Ash and friends are currently trapped in. After explaining that he is ultimately responsible for the ensuing chaos and that humans trapped in the internet would be killed if antivirus software was implemented, he sends the 3 children into the internet as well without their consent. A painful process similar to what their Pokemon go through every time they enter their Pokeballs. Unlike Ash's mind, the complexity of the internet is visualized as a sophisticated and saturated network. As they sink through the screensaver, they are saved by Porygon, who guides them through the series of tubes to where the evildoers are exploiting the frailty of the healthcare system for financial gain. The virtual Pokemon easily defeats the delinquents in the virtual world, but is then beset by its beta version, Porygon Zero, who is now about that life. They battle for dominance, changing into digital champions whilst Ash and friends attempt to save the digital world, whilst the real world is beset by the Geek Squad, a white-collar professional enlisted by the nurse to implement a virtual vaccine. The healthcare workers are united in their ignorance and reject the advisement of the antisocial maverick mad scientist. The antivirus software manifests itself as an ambulance that fires rockets shaped like needles that also turns into a giant needle. Their trypanophobia triggered, they try to evade the incoming Healthstorm missiles aboard the Porygons. The virtual vaccination kills Porygon 1's predecessor, so it has to save them all alone. As they reach the end of their cyber chase, a flurry of medicinal violence approaches. A final obstacle destroyed by Pikachu's Thunder Shock, which saved the 6 of them, but also sent 685 real people into epileptic shock. On Tuesday, December 16, 1997, episode 38 of Pokemon aired for the first and last time. At 6:51 p.m., Japan was literally shook by a cyber attack that still holds the world record for simultaneous seizures. Blame time was forced to fit into the popular narratives of old-school xenophobia and newfangled video games, sowing doubt of the Pokémon brand before anyone in America even knew what Pokémon was. The health scare led to a hasty hiatus as the effects of televised video game tie-ins were assessed and studied. The root cause found to be the flashing red and blue colors, a conclusion they could have come to quicker if they had simply just continued to watch the show. 1 out of 4,000 people are susceptible to photosensitive seizures. The other 3,999 suffer from having to watch the remainder of this episode. In their escape from the Matrix, they destroy Dr. Akihabara's home and his human transfer machine. The dream of his invention dies even though warp tiles and actual teleportation already exist. They let the lawbreakers just leave, and in their trauma, Ash and friends allow the technical tyros to take credit for solving the problem, ultimately permitting willful ignorance in an episode that is both pro-AI and anti-vaccination. The unsung hero is a healthcare algorithm developed by a misunderstood egomaniac who refused to put the safety and care of those around him above his need to be relevant in his chosen field. The episode ends with Pikachu finally receiving medical care after exerting more power than ever before. Even though it was Pikachu's actions that hospitalized hundreds, Porygon was blamed by association and its subsequent appearances were entirely minor. Porygon was Pikachu's 686th victim. The CGAI took the L. Porygon's exclusion was the solution to an unsolvable problem. Who's that Pokémon? An actual Deus Ex Machina. The perfect Patsy's unearned absence ensured that Pokémon would be continued. After a 4-month hiatus after the last victim was discharged from the hospital, the show returned with a PSA that I also watch every year, featuring an unnamed actress surrounded by a horde of fluffy abundance standing in for the all-male executive board. The public service being announced that the show would go on. Through simplistic imagery, they described their wide circle of corporate influence over government agencies, instructions on how to recreate the conditions of the health scare, and a corkboard covered in letters from children who also cared more about watching their show than the well-being of those around them. The show of force ends with the battle cries of the creatures enveloping her, endearing themselves with the pre-9/11 aesthetic of pure opulence, a precursor of positivity before debuting their return episode Pikachu's Goodbye, which is technically episode 41. They skipped over 39 and 40 because they knew those would also get banned for other reasons, just in time for Christmas. Taking the fall for a problem is just as unmerited as taking credit for the solution, and when you act quicker to do either than actually understand the problem, any solutions that you find will be just as limited as your understanding. Hiding the harm done and banning the bad takes only obstruct the other attempts to find the actual solution, and the underlying issues will always be continued.